Alright, hello everybody. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different than posting a gaming video, um, because this is important to me, and I believe that it needs to be said, and even though it's been said many, many times, by many different people, like, it's still, I want to use what I can use to make the world a little bit better. Um, Before I start, I'd like to say that I understand if you unsubscribe. I understand if you hate me. Uh, whatever. Um, because what I'm going to be talking about today, in my opinion, isn't like an issue about politics. It's just a human issue. Um, so I'm probably going to do another one of these. But this one is kind of pointed at those people who've never actually read the Bible. Um, who would say this, the same people who'd be like, "Oh, well, read the transcripts, read the transcripts." Well, have you read the transcripts? Well, I heard somebody reading parts of them. That's basically what you're doing when you're telling somebody to do something because God wants you to do said thing. Supposedly because the Bible says so. No, because your preacher said so because your preacher's a bigot. Um, and I wrote this like 3 weeks ago when a lot of this just started getting like, and it just getting worse and worse and worse, and I'm just so pissed off and frustrated, and I'm like actually somewhat calm now. So there's a global pandemic, right? Like just literally 135,000 United States citizens have died. Okay, there and this is just the United States, right? So 300 million people in one country, 130,000 plus are going to die. And you're thinking that praying is going to work. I'd like to ask, how did that work in the Black Plague? And there are videos you can find online, and I will link the one that I like the most. And oh, well, that's just whatever. Blah, blah. No, it's a very accurate map of all the how the Black Plague spread. And if you watch it, it goes across Europe, and also hits Japan and all sorts of other places that you may or may not know, and it goes right around Poland. And people be like, "Well, Polish people just have really good immune systems." No. Now, see, the reason why I was really interested in this to see this is because I have a history book that matches up the exact same thing, Concise History of Poland, and basically they invented in sort of the modern day, they invented quarantine. And so if someone in their town got sick with the Black Plague, right? In Europe, they'd be like, "Ah, it's just the witch over there cursing us." And over here, they're like, in Poland, they're like, "Well, this person's sick. The people around them get sick. How about they not leave their house until they're either better or until they die?" And people are like, "Oh, this is a great idea." And so if those people didn't listen, they would kill them. Or they would end up basically quarantining whole towns. And you'll see on the border towns of Poland that a lot of those towns were just full of dead people with like maybe 10, 15, if there were 100 people there in the first place left, with 10 or 15 of them like that survived. And so, they prayed, yeah, but they were like, "What else can we do to stop this? Huh, let's lock these, let's keep them from doing the thing that is going to get us sick. Oh my gosh, thank God for these ideas." That's how you get your prayers answered. You have to actually do something. And then, so, look, if you've ever actually read the Bible, God will not do shit if you don't do what you need to do to set it up for him, to make it work. Right? Pray. Step 1, pray. Step 2, attempt to do what he wants, right? So don't be like, well, God didn't fix my issue. Darn. Right? Don't be like, God, I need to win the lottery, right? I'm poor. I don't have a house, right? I need, right? And God's sitting up here like, in the name of my son, buy a fucking lottery ticket. Because he can't make you win the lottery if you don't go buy the ticket. Another example, vaccines. Why else would this thing exist? Why would God create somebody on the planet with the capability to create a vaccine to prevent you from getting a horrible disease? As long as you're not like, oh, I exclusively follow the Old Testament, which nobody does. If there's somebody on this planet who does, like, I have no words for you. Because you kind of missed something that happened 2,000 years ago. And because even people who would identify as, like, as Jewish, right? They would say, oh, well, I'm not actually Jewish. I'm this other thing because we don't believe that stoning gay people is acceptable, and we don't believe that God is constantly punishing us for doing something he doesn't like. And I'm going to explain this very simply because a lot of you like really simple explanations. God is not punishing us with this pandemic. He's not punishing us with riots. He's not. That's all us. It's all ourselves. He's like, hey, I gave you the tools. You chose not to use them. Sucks to be you. God has changed. And it's obvious in the Bible if you actually read it. First, when people were sinning, he's like, all right, I'm going to kill all of you because you're wrong. You're sinning. You need to stop doing this. You need to die. Right? And he kills them all. Multiple times. Then there's Noah and his family. And so he killed everybody except for Noah and his family. Right? And they were responsible for, Noah's Ark and the saving the animals and blah, blah, blah. Okay, and then there are 3 towns, and I can't remember what they're called because it's been a little while. And he was going to kill everybody in there because they were very sinful and lustuous. But there was one guy who didn't sin. And he was like, you know what? There's one good person that is worth it. I'm not going to kill everybody because there's one good person. And then Jesus comes along and is like, you know what? God loves you. Please get baptized. And then you go all the way to the end. And it's like, you know what? Fuck it. Everybody's forgiven. You all go to heaven. Great. And a lot of people like to be like, they like to go back to the Holy War section of the Old Testament and be like, see, kill all infidels. It says kill all infidels. Right? And just this is great because that is where in the Quran, because the Old Testament is the same as the Old Testament, quote unquote, in the Quran is the same as the Old Testament in your, Bible, Christian Bible. And because it's shared, right? The only difference is Christianity had Jesus, And, oh, let's see. The Quran, Islam had, oh, they also had Jesus, but they had this other guy, Muhammad, who said a little bit more, kind of like Latter-day Saints, Mormons, where they're like, oh, well, yeah, Jesus said all these things, but our founder also said these other things. And so it's like when you go, oh, the Quran says kill all infidels. No, that's Old Testament. You're being an idiot. Right? So if you're truly a Christian, I guess you should be running around killing all infidels. Oh, wait, that doesn't work because God forgives everybody and you all go to heaven no matter what the fuck you believe. Sure, getting baptized, getting married, blah, 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 following all the sacraments helps. But, like, in essence, it doesn't really matter unless you do something so damning. Like, in my opinion, be Hitler. The only good thing he ever did was kill himself. But according to Dante's Inferno, you get sent to hell for killing yourself. So, I mean... So, the point is, if God changes, okay? Like, he's clearly changed, right? And we are made in his image, right? Shouldn't we also be changing instead of being like, well, you know what? My political party or my team's the best or all this new information, I don't believe it. But it's like, really? God changes because he gets new information. He's like, how can I make this better? Right? I love everybody. And they just keep doing the wrong thing. How can I make this better? And at the end, you end up with an unconditional, basically, get into heaven. And here we're sitting here like, hey, can you guys wear a mask? It'll help prevent people from dying and getting sick and having permanent lung damage. Just so you know, when I was younger, I had bronchitis. That fucked up my lungs. So I constantly, and you'll notice in the live streams or the other videos or whatever, I'm constantly trying to like cut out the fact that I'm coughing because I'm like, I always have this stupid persistent dry cough and there's literally nothing that anybody can do about it. I've gone to the doctor, I've taken Sudafed, I've taken Actifed, I've drinking pineapple juice, I've, everything that could possibly do to get rid of my cough, and it doesn't work because it's my lungs that are screwed up. And it shows up super bad when in the summer, at the end of the summer, which is another whole thing that pisses me off, the fact that everything catches on fire, and I live in Washington, which has the cleanest air short of like the top of the Himalayas in the world. And I can't breathe normal like everybody else because I've got this lung damage from the freaking bronchitis. Because they didn't... And so, like if I get sick, oh, COVID already screws up your lungs. Sweet, so I am double screwed. And I get it, maybe you don't like me and you want to get other people sick or, whatever, right? Or, oh, you're young, it won't matter, right? Okay, cool. You can believe that, right? We don't have enough information. But the benefit of the doubt really helps, right? Because God gave you the benefit of the doubt and was like, well, just because you, do all these things, yeah, you'll still go to heaven. So if God's changing, we should also be changing. God gets new information and he changes his view. You get new information and you should change your view. And that doesn't mean like, here's a conspiracy theory, right? No, here's facts and proof. Cool. And I do the same thing. And if somebody brings up like some website or whatever, right, I go, okay, well that's this new information. And then I go and I look into it. And sometimes it's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. And other times it's like, Okay, so you do realize that this website got bought out by a Russian oligarch who has intense ties to Putin, and even though the rest of their stuff is, um, incredibly accurate, turns out that they are the only people in the entire world that you can sit there and be, searching in Google or Bing or, whatever, that has an article on this. And there's actually 4 articles that say the exact opposite from like New York Times, Washington Post, whatever. So maybe this article isn't accurate because there's a bunch of others that say the opposite. And that guy might have some, reason to make it pro whoever, right? Pro whatever. So this brings us to my next point. Stop killing people! The only logical explanation as to why people take stuff out of context is so they can control other people. Right? And I personally believe that, like, telling the truth at all times, no matter what, even if it hurts you, even if it hurts somebody else, is the best thing to do, because then you can sit there and deal with it and work it out if you try to be kind of a reasonable person. So, pretty much no matter who you are, you want some sort of power or control over others, and you might think, oh yeah, Ben, Alex, whatever, you're trying to control everybody, right, and make us think your way. And I mean, yes, I'm trying to make you think and see how I see it, but like Plato, when he wrote Plato's Republic, he believed that leaders should know what's best for the people who follow them. And generally, I try to do a good job with that. I care more about the people who follow me than the people who I'm in charge of than the people who I don't, that don't want me taking that, they don't want me as their leader. And that's just the best I can do. So, bullies put people down, they threaten, they use violence, right? That's like the classic, right? Everybody knows what a bully is, right? To get control and power. Politicians, supervisors, managers, CEOs, they lie, they cheat, they break promises because it's the cost of doing business and survival of the fittest, right? But they expect you to be following it fairly while they're cheating and getting the advantage. So shouldn't you be having the cost of doing business and having survival of the fittest and cheating and all that stuff? Well, the reason you don't do that is because society only works when like 90% of the people follow the rules. And honestly, it should be 100%. But right now, everything that's going on, right? Protests against the masked, protests against police brutality, protests against police not getting held accountable, protests against people not being considered equal. Both black, African American, Hispanic, whatever, not equal to a straight white guy. And I know this sounds great coming from a straight white guy. So, but I can recognize that literally every other group is considered a minority compared to a straight white dude. Women get paid less than me. African Americans won't get hired because of their name. Freaking, like, and if you're a black female, you're screwed, right? Transgender people, they get fired all the time for no reason whatsoever because they weren't working hard enough, even though they were working twice as hard as everybody else. What, maybe they got fired because they made them look bad? No, they got fired because the person was uncomfortable with them. We can't be tolerant of intolerance. Because what happens is you end up with Nazi Germany, and I know everybody loves using that example, but like, if you're okay with, right, so people are like, oh, well, this doesn't affect me, right? This doesn't affect me. So here's the thing. If it doesn't affect you, you're going to be like, oh, well, it doesn't matter, right? So I'm okay with it. But that's what Nazi Germany did. They went, okay, we're going to take out this group of people. It's going to be the Jewish people. All right, we're going to start killing the Jewish people and putting the Polish people in here in the internment camps now. Okay, now that we've killed a bunch of the Jewish people, we're going to kill the Polish people. Okay, now that we've killed the Polish people, we're going to start killing the Czechoslovakians. Okay, and now we're going to start killing, and then basically people are like, oh, outside the country, we're like, oh, they're killing everybody. We need to stop this. Because the people inside the country didn't want to do shit. They're like, oh, it doesn't affect me until it affects you. Right? Like the governor of Oklahoma right now. I love this. Oh, well, I don't, coronavirus won't affect me. Then he's got coronavirus. So, first governor. And, I mean, frankly, nobody's going to care until the person that they, blah, 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 dies of it. So, when you make a mask, right, when you're like, oh yeah, here's a mask, put the mask on. Because honestly, that's survival of the fittest. That's the cost of doing business. It's freaking $5, okay? And if you're really worried about it about not being able to breathe, get a coffee filter. Bend it, okay? Look, here. It's a coffee filter. Fold it in half. Fold it, okay? Fold these ends in, right? Boom. Fits right in your mask. Oh, great. Now you smell like coffee filter. It keeps the mask off your face. And apparently, according to some people, it actually helps with the filtration. Oh my gosh, so now you can breathe, and you don't have to worry about falling off your face. And honestly, look, whatever, right? Whether you're protesting masks, whether you're protesting police brutality, whether you're protesting whatever, people everywhere are sick of other people being the exception. Okay? That's what you need to understand. Black Lives Matter protesters are sick of police officers being the exception, right? It does not matter in that aspect if the person's black, if the person's white, if the person's another police officer. They're sick and tired of police officers killing people and not having any consequences. Okay? That is the point. They're sick and tired of slave owners whose statues were erected to tell African Americans, we don't want you, you're still beneath us, right? They were added up in the Jim Crow era, and there's hundreds of videos about that you can watch. I learned that in 3rd grade, okay? I didn't know racism existed until I was taught about it in school. Because I thought literally everybody was exactly the same. Okay, yeah, sure, Jamil's got slightly darker skin than me, but if I went outside in the sun more, I could be tan too. Okay? That was 2nd grade, 3rd grade me. And I don't sit here and be like, oh, well, I have this one black friend. If you have to say that, you're racist. I'm sorry, but if you have to say, oh, well, I have this one black friend, or I have these black friends, right? You're racist. I'm sorry. That is the truth. I'm not racist. I have a black friend. That's you making an exception. Like, you're sick of everybody else making an exception for police, for, you know, certain people not being allowed to wear not having to wear masks, etc., right? And I know, right, I'm clearly sick of everybody else getting treated as an exception, or even myself. Like, it's disgusting how, like, if I'm sitting there, right, at a store, right, and, you know, there's like 5 or 6 of us, right, and, you know, there's my example is like the deli line at the store. Okay, so I'll be sitting there, and people kind of congregate around. They don't really, you know how they do. They just like kind of congregate around. They don't make a line. It's just kind of like, and sometimes they don't have like a ticket, the number thing. But like even if they do, the person will look straight at me and be like, "Hello, sir, can I help you?" And I'll be like, "No, no, 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 no. That guy was here first, or that girl was here first." And yeah, that's what you should do. But like a lot of people, they don't. They'll be like, oh, well, you know. And it's just like, because I'm the white dude. I'm the most stereotypical guy you could possibly be. And maybe it's racism, you know, whatever, preference, familiarity, blah, 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 right? But like, the black dude never gets called first. It's not simply random like you'd like it to be. And that is racism, in all honesty, right? It's not like, oh, I'm intending to be an asshole. But no, you have to, frankly, you have to do the opposite. You have to make efforts to do the opposite, to not be, to get rid of that basically institutional or burned in racism. And I'll catch myself doing something accidentally because that's blah, 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 whatever I was taught, right? And you should too. You shouldn't just be like, that's just the way the world is. Okay, well, you know, I don't know, because this is for conservative people who've probably stopped watching. Um, but Hillary's email, oh, well, that's just the way the world works. But Mexicans coming out, that's just the way the world works. I don't think you like that. And nobody else does. That's just the way the world is. We all grew up, I hope, as Americans, having like an imagination of what America was, right? And what America was going to be, right? And I can imagine that in my head, Donald Trump growing up believed America was some super amazing, great, awesome thing, right? And he's trying to make it the way it was when he was younger, right? When he was a kid, when he believed that America was great and it wasn't great. So, and like I can understand that, but like going backwards is maybe not the answer because we were never there where our kid version of ourselves thought America or thought our country was. Right? And all of us who sit here and go, America is the greatest country in the world. No matter what, we can't change it because it's so amazing. No. Um, and if we're like, um, I don't get why we don't just be like, oh, well, you know, I thought America was like this when I was a kid, and I wasn't sure about that. So I asked a friend, and I asked all my foreign friends this. I go, before you moved to America, what was something that you thought was like America, but didn't happen? And my friend, John Paul, I love this guy. He goes, I thought there was no homelessness in America. And like, you know, American, you'd be like, ah ha ha, you know, there's homelessness everywhere. And, but you think about that and you go, he's from another country, right? He was a refugee and he's known basically homelessness his pretty much his whole life. And he came to America and didn't think that we had homelessness. And I mean, like, people are like, oh, well, that's just the way the world is. That's naive. They want to be homeless. The point is, he thought it was better, right? And it wasn't. And so his reaction was, let's make it better. Let's fix this. Let's work on fixing homelessness, right? Because he knows what it's been like. He's been 18 years, 20 years homeless. His whole life. And, like, we're just all, we're like, oh, yeah, homelessness, it happens. But no, that should be something we should fix, right? Ask people who moved to America, like, hey, what's something that wasn't, right? Ask little kids, what's something when ask adults, what's something that you thought about America that was different when you grew up, right? Different now that you're an adult. And, like, for me, I was like, I didn't know racism existed until I learned about it in school. Right? And that might be one of the reasons why I'm like, I try to be friends with everybody, right? And I'll be friends with, like, I'd never had like a squad. I always had like, okay, I'm friends with you four people, I'm friends with you four people, I'm friends with you, right? And at lunch in high school, I'd bounce, like, we had a half an hour lunch, and every 7 minutes, right, I'd bounce to one of the other 4 or 5 groups of friends that I had, because nobody, and then my senior year, I was the first person in the lunchroom for lunch, and I sat down at an empty table, right, because all the tables were empty, and all of those groups were like, oh, I want to sit by Ben, right? And so I had like 4 tables around me, right? These like long ass, like 30-person tables, 20-person, they're like 10 each, yeah, 20-person tables of just people that like liked me, and we're in all those groups and stuff, and it was just like, wow, this massive group of people. And it was really cool, because I was like, oh, yeah, so all my friends are finally, like, getting together and being friends. But, like, I didn't really have, like, one friend group where, like, these 5 people were only friends with each other and me. And then these 5 people were friends with each other and then me, right? So, like, I was, like, really bounce around all the groups. And so, right, so that goes to, like, when, so in some of us in our emotional conquest for power, no matter how small it is, you know, everyone wants power over somebody, right? I couldn't care less. I just want everybody doing the right thing, right? And, whether it's Democrat, Republican, Libertarian, Russian spy, Chinese video game maker, or anime watcher, pretty much nobody believes 100% in what said party or group or whatever believes. Yet you're going to sit here and be like, well, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to let you shoot at me because I believe that my party is better than yours. That's like, and I brought up the anime watcher, right? Like, that's like saying, you're going to fight. You're going to have a Naruto fan fight a My Hero Academia fan over which one's better. These are cartoons. And yeah, some people argue like, oh, one's better than the other, right? And one will be like, here's the statistics, blah blah blah, right? But like, there's more people, blah blah blah, 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 all sorts of stuff, right? And they're both good, TBH. And so it doesn't matter, right? Like, you shouldn't define yourself by your political party, especially because you don't believe 100% in everything. Like, you might believe like the main things, right? Like, say you're a Democrat, right? Pro-choice, right? And not even all Democrats are pro-choice. Like, you look at our House of Representatives, right? Blah blah blah. Amount of people, not all of them are pro-choice. Not all of them are pro-abortion. I mean, not all of them are anti-abortion. Not all of them are pro-gun, right? Not all of them are anti-gun. like, the solutions are different, right? And so, like, maybe you're conservative, right? You might be pro-gun, you might be anti-gun, but, like, the solutions are different, right? So a conservative would be like, well, no restrictions whatsoever, right? And a Democrat would be like, well, let's put some taxes on here and some restrictions, right? I think it's Washington where I live. They require you to have a gun safe, right? Which makes sense. Like, why wouldn't you have a gun safe? Um, for multiple reasons. Like, if your house burns down, your guns are safe. Um, so like, why wouldn't you like? Um, and there'll be all sorts of other things around the house, right? Like, so there's different kind of gun safes that you can have. And there's even ones that'll pull out in your bed, right? So you can like tap this thing, or above your headboard, right? So you can tap. But those are gun safes, right? Like, it's so and but like, I believe it's required, and you have to have. And I mean, yeah, they're expensive or whatever. And my personal solution is like, if you buy a gun, right? With all your taxes and forms and blah 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 and all this stuff, you should get like a percentage off, a significant percentage off of a gun safe if you don't have one. Like, to me, that makes sense, right? And that may be a company thing, but like, the government can force people to do that, and then like, that's another issue that like conservatives might have. Well, it's infringing upon my freedom. What, your freedom to cost of doing business, your freedom to screw over everybody else, because if it's government mandated that the thing costs less, and this might be naive, but like, it costs less, okay? But that money will come from somewhere else, and it'll be taxes, right? I pay taxes. I see my taxes in action. I used to work for the government, right? Like, I was paying, essentially paying myself. And like, there's a lot of stuff that government workers do, non-politics wise, that are super important. And the politics is essentially just a stupid game that everybody has to play in order to get your roads fixed. You have potholes everywhere because I don't want to pay taxes because they don't use it correctly anyway. Well, we need to raise the taxes so we can fix the roads. Well, you didn't use it last time. Yeah, we did. That was 25 years ago. Like, um, so the and so like, you get all these fights and hatred and towards each other, but you're like, you're really, you need to trying to solve the same problems. You need to compromise, and you need to actually talk it out and understand, maybe not what the other side is saying, because like, that's understandable, right? You think the opposite of what I want, so I like, okay, I understand you think you don't like what I'm saying. Cool. I know that you don't like. I've been through basic human existence. I know what I know what I know what you not liking what I'm saying means. Like, you don't like what I'm saying. Like, does that make sense? Right? And maybe you like the opposite, or maybe you prefer a different method. I won't know unless you tell me. But instead of you being like, ah, you filthy liberal, you goddamn snowflake, I'm gonna shoot you if you get on my lawn. Like, no, like, that kind of hatred's not okay. And so this will bring me to my next point. Yeah, I know I'm talking a lot. Hatred towards like homosexual people, right? So gay people, lesbians, blah blah blah. Any non-binary gender, transgender, um, just someone who isn't the status quo, as you would say. I just want to point out that Greek culture, the reason there's so many naked statues of men is because they loved the male body. You were allowed to have as many male sexual partners as you wanted, but the only reason you were required to have a wife in Greek culture is because they wanted you to have kids. Because they recognized that guys couldn't stick it, you couldn't do it, and make children. Like, it doesn't work when you're the same gender. At least back then. Like, now you can do some crazy science stuff, which is super cool. But, like, if you hate somebody because their sexuality, right? Because your religion says so, right? Like, you must be reading the Old Testament or something, like I talked about earlier, because Jesus was like, God loves all of you. God loves all children who are baptized, right? And then later they're like, we love everybody. And it's just like, that's why these religions are so popular, because it literally includes everybody. The reason you stop including people, the time you stop including people means that you're starting, you start becoming a cult, and you start becoming worse and worse and worse for people. And then soon it snaps, and people are like, well, I don't want to be religious anymore because religions are bad, right? And so, like, you, by saying, oh, well, God hates gay people, or I hate gay people aren't okay, right, is, like, totally wrong. Especially if you're like, oh, the Bible says so. But that's the Old Testament. So do you honestly think, like, in all honesty, do you think that you should get up, grab a stone, and just start throwing rocks at gay people, like at Gay Pride in Seattle? No! That's so, like, the most stupid thing ever. Like, why would you do that? Now that you feel like, I mean, maybe you would. And you would get put in jail for assault. You would get tried for assault. Aggravated assault. Like, that's unacceptable. And discrimination, all sorts of other crap. Be a hate crime. And your excuse would be, well, God told me so. You know how stupid that sounds? I read the Old Testament and thought that I should start stoning people at gay. No! And I know this coming from a 23-year-old telling you that everything that your hateful pastor said, right, blah, blah, blah. Right, and there's a Macklemore line. Yes, Macklemore, he's the man. From the song Same Love, and he says, a preacher said at a sermon, if you preach hate at a service, those words aren't anointed, and and the water you soak in is poisoned. So what that means is, if you are preaching hate, or if you are advocating hate, then God does not stand by that. That is unacceptable. And your holy water is no longer holy, right? Your holiness, you've sinned, essentially. Like, you are not doing the right thing. So, I'm going to go on to racism because I don't know how to finish that. And look, I'm 23, and you're going to be like, well, you're wrong because you need experience. That's not the way the world is. Like, write down what you're saying and then read it in 2 months. Right? Read it in 2 weeks. Right? I wrote 2 pages and posted on my Facebook, and I've talked way more than 2 pages worth. Right? It should have been 15 minutes. It's at 45 right now. So in the past, right, we've fought over people because this guy's blacker than me, or this guy's whiter than me, or this dude over here he looks kind of red. Why is that guy yellow? Like, well, like, I mean, in all honesty, right? Like, Japan in the past, not currently, in the past, right? When Hitler was trying to kill everybody, Japan wanted to kill everybody. because they believed they were the superior race, and that's the only reason they allied with Hitler, was because Hitler thought he was the superior race, and they thought they were just going to fight each other at the end, because they had this big thing called Russia and the United States in the middle of them. So that's kind of, like, if you have that mindset that, like, because you are white, or because you are straight, or because you are whatever you are, that makes you better, other than the hard, solid facts that you are flat out better at something than someone else, like, maybe you are, I don't know, maybe you and your wife had 13 kids, okay? And they're all, like, completely, reasonable, good human beings. You could say that you are better at adulting than most people. You could say that you're better at being a parent than most people. Like, that is this hard fact, because you have proof. And, like, if you're like, well, I'm better than Jaquisha, I don't know, I'm just making up names here. Well, I'm better than Brian, or I'm better than Bob, or I'm better than Sam, or Joe, or Jim, or, because, he is not white, right? Or because he is, he looks like he's unintelligent, right? Like, this is wrong. When they took kids and they had a bunch of identical images, okay, of, and the only difference was the skin color, right? So these are like cartoon drawings, right? It was identical pictures, right? All the black lines, right? The drawing lines were all identical, but the skin color was different. And they asked, I think it was like 100 white kids and 100, um, of each group, basically. Or, sorry, 100 kids of, mixed group. And overwhelmingly, the black and darker skinned kids, when they asked which one is the good person, right? Which one is the good girl, right? Because it was an image of a girl. They would point the white one. And when they would say which one's the bad girl, they would point at the more darker skinned one. Like, that's a problem, okay? When you're asking 10-year-olds who's good and who's bad based off of, and they say that based off of skin color. And it was overwhelmingly like that way, even with the white kids, right? And it was just like, okay, so now these kids are all racist, and I mean, they don't intend to be, right? It's just how they're taught. And but the thing is, you need to recognize that that's a problem, because, for example, like with coronavirus, if you don't recognize that it's a problem, then you end up like the United States. You end up like your governor in Oklahoma getting coronavirus, right? You end up with, I think it was over 40 Secret Service agents that were in close contact with Trump. It might have been 4. I think it was 4, not 40. Had gotten sick, and I think it was an unreasonable amount of them have gotten, like, sick that weren't in close quarters with him. And it was just like, that's a problem, right? Like, when you're sitting here like, well, it's not an issue, right? And then, like, your people that are supposed to protect you from basically people coughing and spitting and blah, 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 like, are getting sick. Like, that's an issue. And you need to recognize it, right? You need to recognize a problem before you can solve it, right? It's not going to be like, and I mean, it's not going to be like science, where you're going to be like, I'm going to try to solve this issue and then completely find another solution, right? So, like, I'll use cat litter as an example, because that's what's on the top of my head. cat litter is great. Did you know cat litter was originally invented to clean up oil? It was originally intended to clean up, like if you were changing your car oil or like an oil field, oil got everywhere, right? You're supposed to throw cat litter on it. Well, originally that's what it was for. Well, people weren't buying it because, not everybody needed that. But then you suddenly start being like, oh, well, this clumps too, right? So this clumps when it gets wet, like just for the oil. Well, it also does a great job at if cats peed in this or pooped in this, right? Because cats like to do that, and so like that's great. So they're like, oh, well, we can sell this as cat litter, and so now like when you go to a mechanic shop, they'll have like cat litter everywhere, so that because they can, just throw it if they spill some oil and then like safely clean it up. And like that's an example of like something that you discovered as be like, oh well, we can use this for some other things, right? Like it's not going to be like that if you don't identify that as a problem, right? You can't just be like, oh, we found the cure. We already had the cure to coronavirus. It was eating raw mangoes and avocados after grilling them. Like it's not going to be like that. And if it is, like, oh my gosh, um, it's impossible to eat raw food after you've grilled it. You can have undercooked food, but not raw. So we're gonna look. Either we're gonna look back at ourselves and be like, "Man, you're all a bunch of idiots," or whatever's the next species that's gonna live on this planet after we've all, that's become sentient, after we've all managed to kill ourselves in basically race or religion wars, right, or ideology wars, they're gonna look back and be like, wow, what a bunch of fucking idiots. From studying their culture, they just hated each other because some people genetically needed more protection from the sun based off of where their ancestors were from. Seriously, if you're afraid of somebody because of the color of their skin, you need to seek mental help. This is important. Because that is not a thing that you should be afraid of. If you're afraid of somebody with a gun, you might want to be cautious, but you shouldn't be, because like that's something that they have that you might not have. Same thing like if you see someone walking down the street with a sword, like unless there's a medieval fair going on, I would be concerned. Right? Like unless there's a gun show going on and some guy's waving his gun around, right? I would be concerned. And some people might argue, well, there's a black guy walking down the street. Oh, okay. Well, he crossed the streets to go to the other side. Yeah, because he's assuming that you're racist and are going to view him as a threat. So he's going away from you, and then he's going to come back behind you, and you're like, ah, he's going to attack me. No. He's literally trying to make sure that what has happened in the last 2 months doesn't happen to him. Oh, he's got his hood up. You probably have a hat or your hood on or long hair. Like, it's probably cold. Or maybe he's cold. Like, do you not, how do you not understand this? Right? And if you're afraid of somebody because they're from Russia or China, right? Or wherever. You honestly should not be. Because, like, that's just, the chances are that they're like a spy or whatever, right, is very low. And like we're all just people. Like And like, if you think that every single Chinese person, or every single Russian person, or every single person who speaks a different language hates you and all sorts of stuff, right? Like, I used to think in middle school, every time somebody didn't speak a language I understood, right, which was English, I thought they were mocking me or making fun of me, right? Okay? And I still kind of do sometimes, but and that's only if I see my name, right? Like online games or whatever, right? But like, I went and I learned French, right, in high school, 3 years of it. And so now I can hear, like, whenever, because I live in, up by Seattle, every time there's a French person, right, or French people, or people speaking French, I can be like, oh, they're talking about their family reunion that they're having in Edmonds, or, whatever, right? And it's pretty cool. They're not shit talking you, right? And so I use Google Translate a lot, and I actually know, I can recognize quite a bit of Russian because of a game that I play. And I've Google translated so much, essentially. And it's just like, oh, they're just talking about whatever they're talking about. Like, they're not shit talking you. Like, nobody cares. Like, nobody cares enough to just sit here and shit talk you. You're the one who's shit talking everybody else. If you're the one shit talking everybody else because they're speaking different language, like, you're probably the issue. And I'm not saying, like, go up to, like, some random person or whatever and be like, start singing Kumbaya. Like, come on. We're in the middle of a pandemic. Why the fuck do you think somebody would want to hold your hands and sing Kumbaya? Like, what is wrong with you? You're all gonna get sick. I'm saying that there's really no reason than your irrational fear that someone or something is different than you. And you frankly do not need any sort of, like, power that you think you'll gain by suppressing or being horrible to somebody. Right? If you're, and say you are afraid of somebody, right? Like, so you could be like, hey, I don't know, like, it'd be rude, but like, it has to be done, right? You could be like, hey, you know, you're walking too close to me, it makes me uncomfortable. Okay? So then, like, and then you and the other person do something about it, right? So maybe they need to slow down walking just a little bit, or maybe you need to slow down walking and, let the space kind of do itself, right? So you should, and everyone got the right to their own little bubble, right? Especially now, right? Like, more than anything, you have the right. It's actually a requirement, but you have the right for 6 feet of space around you, right? So stick your arms out and double that. So like, if someone's too close to you, right? For whatever reason, right? Like, if there's a dude or a lady and it's like they're too close to you and it makes you uncomfortable, right? You'd be like, hey, can you, social distancing place, right? That could be like the polite way, right? Or you could be like, hey, you make me uncomfortable because I'm a racist bigot. No, no. You're making me uncomfortable because you're a stranger, right? And or flat out tell them the truth. Like, make them be like, hey, you make me uncomfortable because I am not comfortable with blah blah blah. And I mean, that's rude, but like, it'll help you understand that you have issues that you need to work through, and it'll help you identify the problem when you're saying it to, right, when you're saying like, oh, hey, can you move, hey, can we keep some space between us, or whatever. um because, like, it'll help you recognize that you have a problem and that you'll be able to fix it when you're saying something enough, right? And so, but in reality, people that seek power want to, the best way, like, if you truly want any sort of, like, power, the best way, in all honesty, is just be a good leader, right? Like, you see Donald Trump, right? Like, his ratings are going down, 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 because what he did was he united people under the hatred of the other, right? And so, I mean, yeah, but he can't do that again because there's just he's gone down his path, and so now if you're not with him, right, and people are dropping off because it's like, well, I don't hate those guys. Well, you should, but no, like, well, you know, and so it's like, so people are dropping off like, well, I don't hate those guys. I don't hate those girls. I don't, like, I don't hate my brother in Seattle. Like, that's kind of like the issue that's coming up now. He's like, "We'll kill your family," right? Like, people are dropping off. But if you're a good leader, and I'm not going to say like other political candidates because I cannot say any political candidate. George Washington, I will say, is a very good leader. Not because he was the first president, not because of blah, 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 right? But because he said these two things. They wanted to make him president, right? And then they wanted to make him king, which he was like, we just got away from a king. I don't want to be king. Right? But he also, when they went to do a second term, right? He won the election, all that stuff, and they were like, no, he didn't want to do it, and they were like, no, but America needs you, George. America needs you, right? Like, the good leader is what does what is best for people, for the people that they are in charge of. They tell the truth, right? George Washington was not a liar. He was not known to be a liar. He was known as somebody the exact opposite of Donald Trump. He told the truth, right? Apparently, and this, the other person that you might be thinking of is Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln told the truth. He's got the nickname Honest Abe, right? And George Washington said, I cannot tell a lie, by the way. And these are two of the most biggest things that we know about some of the greatest leaders that we've ever had. They did not lie, or they did not do something. They did not bleh. And George Washington was really interesting because if you asked him a question off the cuff, right, he would kind of stumble, similar like it was about 2 seconds ago. But if he had prepared answers, best answers in the whole world, right? And that's kind of what you want. You want to think about it, have a leader that thinks about it ahead of time instead of just kind of like, what if we put bleach in our bodies? Is there a way to inject that? Like, even if that's a joke, right? Could anyone imagine like George Washington, right? Or Abraham Lincoln? Abraham Lincoln being like, can we inject freedom into the slaves? Is there some way to like just put freedom in them? Like, you see, the reason it sounds stupid is because it is stupid. Leaders should lead, right? By example, right? So if you want someone to do something, you don't sit back in your chair and be like, go do the thing, right? Be like, hey, this is how I do it. If you find a way that works better than you, better for you, please show me, right? Because I would like to know. And if you have questions, come ask me. And, generally try to make, life better. Right? And that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what level, I guess, of God damn it. It doesn't matter like what level of leadership you're on, and what matters is that like you're trying to make things better, and it doesn't matter what you define as better, right? As long as it's better for everybody. Okay, so if like something is better for you, for example, shoving the Bible, down somebody's throat, or threatening non-straight people, right? Or calling the police on a black guy because he's in Starbucks waiting for a friend and didn't want to buy a coffee. Well, actually, yeah. Like, why would you, like, how would you see it as better, right? Like, do not make decisions that don't make life better for everybody else as well as yourself, right? Because you matter as well. So you can't just be like, well, all my decisions are to make everybody else's life better except for myself. That's how you get depressed. Don't do that. You need to care about yourself as well. And it's tough to think that. It's tough to be like, hey, does this make it better for everybody else, right? So, for example, I'll use, I think I'll use guns, right? So, in New Zealand, they banned assault rifles, okay? Sale of assault rifles, and they had to, like, sell back all their assault rifles if you had one. And most of the people are pretty happy with that because they haven't had. I will need to check this. I don't want to say something that's not true. But they've supposedly had less issues with gun violence. And my assumption is that because everybody who could get a gun easily, more or less, would be because it's because everyone's on the fair playing ground with non-automatic assault rifles, or you all have to hit the trigger, right? Instead of just hold it down. And that's my assumption. Even though like the correct way to shoot a gun, even the automatic one, is to in bursts, but that's a whole other thing. But like if we were to say like my thing earlier with the gun safes, and I'm pointing to my gun safe. If you bought a gun, right, which is expensive as all heck anyway, right, like $400 for like a pistol or something, which is like insane, in my opinion. Like, I mean, I don't know anything about like guns, but like that seems like a lot, like if it's a right. But like they should, if it's going to be so expensive, they in training should be included, right? Like a 1 week training course, right, with live fire and all that stuff, right? And either a gun safe should be included, or a lock for your gun at the very least, but also a like a discount on a gun safe, because like that should be, the safety should be a priority. And I know a lot of people don't want to like buy gun safes because they're expensive. Well, but you have a lot of guns, and in some places required, and it should be required everywhere, in my opinion. Um, but it wouldn't be. But would it be bad, okay, if you, when you bought a gun, got 1 week of free training, right? Say, assuming maybe like once a year or once every 2 years or 3 years or whatever, with the gun licensing thing, right? You may take a 1 week of training course, right? And I know some people who have guns and they take refresher courses every 6 months. And I know some people who've never taken gun safety courses, and that's just how it is. And I think it should be different, right? Like I hate saying, oh, well, that's just how it is. right? As you know from earlier, but like I think it should be different. Like it should be the way it should be, right? Like if it was the way that people believe that it should be, the world would be better. Um, but you can't just be like, well, that's just the way it is. Um, and I believe that gun safes should be not as expensive, so that people are more inclined to get gun safes with guns, right? So say you buy like 6 guns, right? And for each gun, it's like 10% off of a gun safe, right? So there you go, 60% off of $1,000 or something, right? So you're paying another $400. You just paid $400 a gun, so I mean, might as well buy a gun safe to put them all in. And it not only the thing about gun safes is that they not only keep your weapons protected, but they keep people from getting them. Say they break into your house, they can't break into your safe. Plus, you know where the safe is, you know where what the combo is, blah blah blah, you know everything. So like on top of all of that, and plus, if they do have a weapon or a gun safes, I believe, are bulletproof, or mostly. So like you could use it as protection. So I mean, like there's just so much like advantages to all this stuff, and you know, to me, it's just how you look at it. Um, and so I'll go to my final kind of thing. So there's so many more things that I can talk about and say, and I might do another video. Who knows? Most of you who needed to hear this or watch this video won't even click play or won't even get past the first few seconds, even if you somehow found this, because I only have like less than 300 subscribers. I'm probably gonna have less. You'll likely never read what I wrote, and you'll likely never hear what I say. But it needs to be, in my opinion, it needs to be seen by so many more people than will actually ever see it. But I will tell you that simply saying someone is wrong because you are invested in a power struggle is causing the most of the issues that is destroying ourselves. Global warming, okay? Racism, you know, climate change, whatever you want to call it, right? There are a couple, like just so many things, right? Like infrastructure, politics, right? Because you're invested in like one side or the other, we're focusing on that separate, and we're not focusing on the fact that we live on the same planet, that we're all human beings, that all the amazing cultures and differences are what makes us so unique. And in all honesty, I cannot imagine, right? Unfortunately, I cannot imagine us like getting to space and like colonizing other planets, right? Multiple other planets, or living in space stations or whatever. I can't imagine us doing that without being able to unite as a world. And competition is good, but I've noticed that friendly competition is way better. Because you can work together, right? So you can be like, oh, competing. And you'd be like, oh, well, you did this thing wrong. So here, let me show you how. You want me to show you how to fix it or not? And then the other person will be like, well, no, thank you. And or yes, please, right? And look, it doesn't do anyone any good for you to like vie for power, right? Like, so like, I'll say Vladimir Putin. Who the fuck does it do any good besides Vladimir Putin to make president for the rest of his life, right? He'd just be a king. It doesn't do anyone any good. Doesn't do Russians any good. Doesn't do Ukrainians any good. Doesn't do anyone except for Vladimir Putin. Right? They're changing their constitution because of him, to make him essentially king. So that doesn't do anyone except for the one person any good. Getting more power doesn't do anyone except for one person any good. It hurts you, it hurts your family, it hurts your friends, it hurts everybody. And maybe you just want to hurt the people who, whatever. But why? There's no point. It doesn't benefit you to screw other people over. The only people who it doesn't hurt are the same people who insist we continue fighting one another. And I'm not talking about the random Ukrainian guy you met online playing video games. I'm not talking about the kid who's got autism who you can't help but love because they aren't afraid to be themselves because they don't see any of these societal rules that people follow. And I'm talking about the people who do anything to get the semblance of control to feel superior to others. Right? So whether it's your racist grandma, your homophobic uncle, or your president of the United States, it seems our only strength is how well we can tear each other apart for the sake of control and power. That kills people. Okay? And if you're not fighting for a better future, right? Whatever that means, you are the fucking problem.